Michigan State at Maryland. Zach, this is our very first Big Ten conference game. It is very interesting to have these two teams playing. Maryland absolutely looks spectacular, beating UConn 50 to, what was it, 7?
7.
Yeah, Michigan State struggled against Florida Atlantic 16 to 10. I do think Florida Atlantic is a better team than UConn, but that is still a much smaller win margin than Maryland had in their game. Maryland favored by 8 points here at home, so could be a close game, but one of those spreads that could also mean that it's going to be a blowout, and Maryland could just really take it away here. This game is on Saturday at 3:30 on Big Ten Network. Zach, what are some of your thoughts going into this game?
I was expecting a lot more out of Aiden Childs, and I think he showed in the Florida Atlantic game that he's more of a project than I think anyone wanted to admit. And I think I've been notoriously down on Maryland, and UConn's not good, right? Like they're not a good team.
Yeah.
But my big concern was Maryland's offensive line and the quarterback situation. I'm like, I don't think Billy Edwards is going to be good. He played pretty well, like over 300 yards. I thought the line played okay. Hemby didn't run roughshod, but I mean, still 4.5 yards a carry. Not great, but not terrible. But I think Ty Felton showed that he's a dude at receiver. The defense, I think, is probably better than I anticipated. I think you were preaching how good the defense could be this year, and I think I'm warming up to that, and that makes me think this is I think the 8 point spread's too low. Like I think Maryland. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, but if I were, this is the game I'd say you probably want to take Maryland and the points here, or you take them to cover. That's what I mean. I don't know betting language.
I feel much better about Maryland after seeing the performance by Billy Edwards this weekend. Like you said, UConn, not a great team, but Billy Edwards, he was doing a lot with his legs. He was doing a lot with his arms. His wide receivers, Ty Felton in particular, has playmaking ability on the outside. When he caught that just quick dig really fast, and then he was able to still get to the end zone. I mean, terrible tackling by UConn, but just really good playmaking ability by Felton to be able to get to the end zone in that sequence there. I look at this Maryland team, and I think that the Maryland linebackers are pretty darn good. I don't think that they're like best in the Big Ten, but I do think they're a little underrated, and I think that overall, the rushing attack of Michigan State, which they had to rely on against Florida Atlantic, is going to come against a tough test here. And even though I don't believe in Maryland's secondary the most, I believe far less in Michigan State's wide receivers. Glover and Foster Jr. to me are just not wide receiver 1 and 2 on a Power 4 team, in my opinion. Could they be nice pieces to kind of supplement in a receiving core? Sure, but I don't think either of them have the skills to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 on most Power 4 teams, at least the high quality Power 4 teams. And so I have a lot of concern there. I will say I liked the trenches of Michigan State more than Maryland, actually. I felt like they did a better performance against Florida Atlantic than Maryland did against UConn, which is really saying something because Florida Atlantic is a better team than UConn. However, at the end of the day, I think Aiden Childs, the ball comes off of his hand. It is very pretty the way the ball comes off of his hand. He throws a good spiral. He throws a good ball. But I like I said, I don't believe in those wide receivers from Michigan State, and I do question some of the decision making of Aiden Childs with him being a new starter this year. He's only 18 years old. I don't think he's even turned 19 yet. I might be wrong on that, but he's very young. He's going to take some growing pains, and this is going to be a difficult game for him going to Maryland. It's not November yet, so the Maryland fans will be there. It's not November yet. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a tough test. I mean, you tell me, Zach, do you think Michigan State had better trenches than Maryland, or am I overreacting to what I saw in week 1?
That's a good question. They certainly had flashes, like good moments, like Kayron Adams Lynch, their running back. I mean, he had a couple of big runs. He ran for over 100 yards on I think like 9 carries. So they had moments. I think a lot of their errors were more unforced errors than anything else. So I I don't feel like I have a good feel for the trenches either way. So I think you would probably know more about that. But I wouldn't say it was like a significant difference in my
Yeah,
mind. Like I think it might be like if Michigan State's a little bit better on the lines, I'm not sure it's enough to matter
yeah,
because I think overall I think it's a bad matchup because the ways that you would want to exploit Maryland, M- Michigan State can't.
yeah. Yeah, I just felt like when UConn was trying to run the ball against Maryland, I felt like they were getting more push than Florida Atlantic was
Yeah,
getting against Michigan State, and I felt like Michigan State was getting more pressure on Florida Atlantic than Maryland was getting on UConn. I think that Maryland, their defense was really good, and in like their coverage and things like that against UConn, but I think that their pass rush was not quite as good. So for me, if Michigan State does win this game, it's gonna be because of the trenches. They're gonna
yep,
have done something in their pass rush or done something in their run defense, and they're just gonna have to block really, really well for Nate Carter and Katron Lynch. Kron or Katron? Kron?
Kron.
Yeah. I keep wanting to say Katron because the Penn State
Yeah,
running
Katron
back.
Allen. Oh
Yeah.
no,
No, not him. Kron Lynch Adams. I
Midge
think that they
Adams.
are good. I think they are good running backs, but I think they're going to need a good offensive line performance from Michigan State here. A
Yeah,
couple
agreed.
comments really fast. Billy says, "Who's the Maryland quarterback?" I think I said it, but Billy Edwards Jr. He won it over MJ Morris. Many people thought it was going to be MJ, but Billy
Mhm.
Edwards. And look up his stats. He had a really good game against
Yeah,
UConn. Dave says all Maryland, Michigan State is awful. So Dave's rooting against both of them here. Brian says, glad to see some conference games. Wish they would have had at least one in week one. I agree. I like when there's at least one conference game every week, but we did have Minnesota, North Carolina. That was kind of neat to see. And then last comment here, it's going to take Smith a year or two for Smith to make Sparty competitive. I tend to agree,
yeah,
especially because you have Aiden Childs back there. It just takes time for Aiden Childs to get better. I had hoped that
yeah,
he could possibly be really good to begin the year, but Foster Jr. and Glover just did not take that leap at receiver
yeah,
that I was
yeah,
hoping they would, at least from what I've seen so far.
yeah. I'll just real quick. I'll say this: if Maryland loses to Michigan State, I think that really would speak to, I think the fool's gold that was this UConn win, and I think that probably means that Maryland is going to have the season that I thought they would, which is not a good one. So I think
So,
that's
so are you picking Maryland here, or are you picking Michigan State?
I'm picking Maryland big.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right. I am picking Maryland as well. My pick is 27-14 Maryland. I think that it could get close, but I think in the fourth quarter you might see a touchdown or a field goal or something like that to pull away from Maryland, and I think that they will cover that
yeah.
-8 there.
I think on my show, I didn't write down my score predictions. I just kind of went off the cuff, and that I'm realizing that was dumb. I think I had like 34-6. I don't see this close, but
Wow, really blowout.
yeah, but I was not as dialed into the trenches as you were. So
Yeah.
I think you might be closer on this one.
We'll see. We'll see. Ryan Myers, good question here. He says MSU fans feeling like they dodged a bullet that Smith didn't bring DJU with him. I don't know. Would you rather have DJU or would you rather have Aiden Childs after that first performance? He did throw a couple picks. It wasn't the most encouraging things, but there was some, like I said, the ball does come off his hands pretty nice. What do you think, Zach?
I think Aiden Childs. I think there's a reason why DJU. I mean, DJU transferred because Jonathan Smith left, but
Right.
I think there's a reason why Aiden Childs went with Jonathan Smith and not DJU. I
Yeah.
think, like I said, I think Aiden Childs might be more of a project because he's young, but there's a reason why Jonathan Smith's investing in him.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to agree. I tend to agree.